This is such a cool story. Coming up next, the tell of one of the first power ballads ever, maybe the first. It originated during a stormy time for one of the most prolific sibling acts of recorded music history. So this song was covered dozens of times by some huge artists, but it was never a hit until a rookie band from Scotland recorded the definitive version, and even then it struggled to find an audience before blowing up around the globe. We're going to talk about how this ballad finally got its due, one of the greatest vocals ever, and how the band that made it happen was erroneously pronounced dead after one of the most notorious plane crashes of the rock era. But in the end, it was just fake news. Find out next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember this iconic commercial from the 80s.
Where's the beef?
Wendy's kind of people never ask.
You're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the big red button and click the bell so you always know when our interviews and our videos are coming out. Also, check us out on Patreon. There's a link for that below. That helps us keep it a daily channel. You get more content and you can become an honorary producer. So what do you think was the first power rock ballad? Now, some say Dream On by Aerosmith, some say Lady by Styx. But in this episode, we're telling the story of another contender for sure. Love Hurts by Nazareth. Nazareth, the Scottish band hailing from Dunfermline. They took their name from a line in the song The Weight by the band. Things I pulled into Nazareth was feeling about half dead. Such a great song.
Nazareth was feeling about half-past dead.
Now, during their peak years, the core lineup of Nazareth included Dan McCafferty on lead vocals and talkbox. There's Manny Charlton on lead guitar and synths, Pete Agnew on bass, and Daryl Sweet on drums. Nazareth came together in 1968 with all four members holding down day jobs while dreaming of rock stardom. So Pete Agnew, the sole surviving original member, he worked for an architect, and Dan, he was an engineer, Daryl was an accountant, and Manny was a radar specialist in the dockyards for the Navy. Though their day jobs were respectable for sure, they aimed for more than just playing weekend gigs at any pub that had an open slot, which is what they were wanting to do. Their aspiration was to break free from the working class grind and live the life of full-fledged rock stars. It took 6 albums for Nazareth to score a breakout in America. They did it with the highly influential LP Hair of the Dog, featuring the high-octane title track with a bold anthemic chorus, "Now you're messing with a son of a bitch." That's what they said. And Dan McCafferty busting out the talk box in the song's electrifying bridge. Now, the band's use of the talk box, an invention of sound engineer Bob Heil, was a pretty novel concept. Nazareth was one of the first to incorporate it on a recording, but it came out about a year after Joe Walsh's prominent unveiling of the effects unit on Rocky Mountain Way. Hair of the Dog also featured Nazareth's surprisingly powerful reinterpretation of Love Hurts, today's song. So get this, before Nazareth remade Love Hurts, the song had been covered more than 40 times. The song's original version and the second recorded version probably surprise you. Love Hurts was intended to be a song about agonizing heartbreak with a slow waltzing arrangement. It was composed by the prolific husband and wife team of Felice and Boudleaux Bryant. The Bryants, they had an amazing run of success in the 50s and the 60s. Two of their most famous songs were the bluegrass standard Rocky Top and Bye Bye Love, the breakout hit for the iconic sibling duo Everly Brothers. That one went to number 2 on the pop chart and number 1 on the country chart back in 1957.
Bye bye love, bye bye happiness.
The Bryants actually wrote many of the greatest hits for the Everlys, including All I Have to Do Is Dream and Wake Up Little Susie, classics if there ever were.
Dream, dream, dream when I want you. My friends when they say, ooh la la, wake up little Susie.
Don and Phil Everly were such a hot act, they certainly could have had big success with Love Hurts since it was, penned by their gravy-trained songwriters. But the track got held up in the gridlock of record business politics.
Love hurts, love scars.
Now, according to Don Everly, the Everly Brothers intended to release Love Hurts as a single off their 1960 LP A Date with the Everly Brothers. But their manager, Wesley Rose, who also co-owned Acuff Rose Publishing, he had other plans for it. The duo left Cadence Records for Warner Brothers in 1960. However, Rose insisted on them recording singles owned by Acuff Rose, and that led to disagreements. It was a very, very self-serving maneuver on Rose's part for sure. When the Everly Brothers covered Lucille and Temptation, a tune from 1933, Rose objected, causing a serious rift and legal battles. To add insult to injury, Rose gave Love Hurts to another client, the great Roy Orbison. He released it as the B-side to his #1 hit Running Scared in 1961. Don Everly was pissed. He said, and I quote, "Wesley gave our song to Roy Orbison, which was incredibly selfish." He said this on the bio, Walk Right Back, the Everly Brothers on Warner Brothers. He said, "It was our arrangement, written for us. We couldn't release it due to our ongoing legal dispute with Acuff Rose. It became bitterly contentious." End of quote. So technically, the first single release of Love Hurts, that went to Roy Orbison, even though it was the flip side to Running Scared. It became very popular in Australia, where it rose to #5 on the singles chart.
Love hurts, love scars.
Now, like many musicians that grew up in the 50s and 60s, the members of Nazareth loved the Everly Brothers. Now, back when Pete Agnew and Dan McCafferty were part of the Shadettes, they often included Everly Brothers songs in their live sets because they never failed to excite the audience, especially the ladies, right? Love Hurts, it was a particular favorite, always receiving a fantastic response from the crowd whenever it was played. Years later, when they heard Emmylou Harris and Graham Parsons' rendition of the song, they were struck by its unique interpretation, compared to the versions by the Everly Brothers and Roy Orbison's version.
Love hurts.
Influenced by the rendition of Love Hurts by Harris and Parsons, Agnew and McCafferty felt compelled to put their own spin on this classic song, though it wasn't a classic yet. During a period when record labels preferred albums with multiple tracks, for B-sides, Pete and Dan, along with their bandmates Daryl and Manny, decided to record their version of the song. However, there was a hiccup. While Pete and Dan were away at a wedding in Scotland, Daryl and Manny recorded the backing track in the same key as Emmylou's version. Yeah, that key was several octaves above the sweet spot for Dan's vocal style. Now, despite this challenge, McCafferty surprised himself by pushing his voice to reach a range he'd never done, never knew he had. The result was an incredibly emotional rock vocal that added a whole new dimension to this song. Now, when Jerry Moss of A&M Records, the M in A&M Records, when he heard the recording, he loved it. He freaked out. Initially, the song was not planned to be a single, maybe a B-side at best, but Love Hurts ended up as a cut on the album at Moss's insistence. What could have been a missed opportunity turned into a major, game-changing success, with the song eventually becoming a hit first in America, and then, of course, in the UK. But we're not going to fast forward to the fairy tale ending yet. When the single was first released in the UK, and in Nazareth's home country of Scotland, it actually stiffed. It looked like Jerry Moss's ears may have failed him this time. Except something was interesting. Something happening in South Africa. As we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor. Man, I am really excited to present Campfire Audio's Fathom Premium In-Ear Monitor. It's the in-ear monitor that I've been listening to music with virtually every day since I got them, and the ones that I choose to travel with. Fathom is an in-ear monitor for true audiophiles. Fathom is equipped with 6 custom-made balanced armature drives that will greatly enhance your listening experience. The configuration includes dual custom definition super tweeters for crisp, clear highs, mid-range drivers for fuller vocal and instrument reproduction, along with dual custom BA woofers for rich balanced bass. I have become such a big fan of the Campfire brand in general because of their phase harmony engineering. Their attention to every detail and everything that they feature is truly spectacular. Frankly, it's a commitment to detail that I demand from any audio brand so that I can truly escape into my favorite music and hear it in a whole different way. Click on the link in the description below to find out more about Fathom and other superior product options created by Campfire Audio. I got the box back here and I've got them around my neck for the rest of the show. Truly, these things are amazing. So, back to South Africa. For some reason, the single was given a legit shot by radio in the apartheid-marred country, and it flourished. It went gangbusters. It went all the way to #1. Fortunately, A&M didn't ignore the action in South Africa, and they decided to give the song a big promotional push. And the second time was definitely the charm. The second coming of Love Hurts was unstoppable in so many countries, South Africa, of course, leading the way. Love Hurts, it also went to #1 in Belgium, Canada, Norway, Scotland, Denmark, and Germany. And the Netherlands, the song was a phenomenon. I mean, not only did the power ballad shoot to #1, it resided on the singles chart in Holland for 62 consecutive weeks. To date, the definitive iteration of Love Hurts by Nazareth has sold more than 4 million copies around the world. I mean, in Europe, the Nazareth cover has outsold some timeless classics like Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, to name one. So what made the Nazareth version so superior? Well, it was a team effort. All 4 band members brought their A game for sure. Now, not much was changed from the original lyrical line. Nazareth's recording featured only a light alteration. The original line, "Love is like a stove, it burns you when it's hot," that was modified to "Love is like a flame, it burns you when it's hot." I think that's better, actually. Two components in the Nazareth interpretation really shine, though. The guitar arrangement and production by Manny Charlton, and the out-of-this-world vocal performance by the spectacular Dan McCafferty. So Manny shared on social media that he achieved those long sustained notes in the solo without using an EBO device. Instead, he relied on a Les Paul Univibe pedal, an Echoplex, and a Crank Marshall amp to produce feedback in the studio, giving the notes infinite sustain. Additionally, he used a bottleneck slide to play the notes. And this makes the solo difficult to recreate exactly as it was recorded, of course, especially without the same setup. Nowadays, it's much easier to achieve similar effects using an EBO to sustain the notes, though. The lead vocal by Dan McCafferty on Love Hurts, it's out of this world. Not only was it his finest hour with Nazareth, it was one of the greatest vocal performances of the rock era. Unforgettable after just one listen. Now, in order to create the full emotion of Love Hurts, Dan, he let his agony explode unabated. It was one of those seminal performances where you not only heard the torment of emotional suffering, you can also feel physical pain whenever you listen to the song. Dan's vocals soared with an intestinal anguish without singing in falsetto, I might add. There was a natural scratchiness to Dan's sound, but on Love Hurts, he contorted his larynx and he roared from his diaphragm. There was so much more to what Dan created in the studio than just straining his vocal cords like many rock singers resort to. Just incredible. And Nazareth wasn't a huge band in America. Hair of the Dog was definitely their apex, but that record was very influential to some aspiring musicians that would become full-on rock icons. Two of rock's most celebrated vocalists cite Dan McCafferty as being one of their biggest inspirations. One of those icons is Brian Johnson from AC/DC. Another one is Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses. In an interview in the late 80s when GNR's Appetite for Destruction was becoming a landmark album, Axl stated that if it wasn't for Dan McCafferty, he just wouldn't be singing, period. Axl called Hair of the Dog one of his all-time favorite albums. In fact, when they were signed by Geffen and they were putting together their plan for Appetite for Destruction, Axl told the A&R executives at Geffen that he insisted on getting the guy that produced Hair of the Dog, which of course was Nazareth lead guitarist Manny Charlton. And apparently Manny met with Axl and Slash and Duff and Izzy and Steven in LA, and he really liked the guys. But his availability was severely limited because he was producing Nazareth's cinema album, which required him to go to back and forth to Glasgow. And the travel proved to be too difficult, so the band opted to go with their second choice for producer, Mike Klink, who produced the epic record to historic proportions.
Take me down to the paradise city where the grass is green and the girls are pretty.
Brian's song Love Hurts isn't overly complex in its lyrics. The pre-chorus delves into themes of happiness, blissfulness, and togetherness, while also hinting at the self-deception of others. Yet despite its simplicity, the song's melodies and harmonies possess a charming, relatable sweetness. Follows the classic 3-minute track formula, seamlessly shifting key and mood midway and building up to a poignant climax. Nazareth, however, they turned the song into a dramatic 3-minute and 52-second rock opera. Now, it would be their last entry on the Billboard Hot 100, except for a 1980s showing with the single Holiday that stalled at number 8.
I don't wanna be a sailor man, mama, mama, please.
As I mentioned, Love Hurts has been a popular tune to cover. It's attracted some of the biggest names in music: Rod Stewart, The Who, Cher, Joan Jett, Hart, Harry Nilsson, even Pat Boone. In addition to Roy Orbison and the version that inspired Nazareth to record the track, the one by Emmylou Harris and the late Graham Parsons.
Love is like a stone.
The Everly Brothers did record a new version of Love Hurts on their 1965 album Rockin' Soul, and Nazareth recorded a later version with the Munich Philharmonic Orchestra that peaked at number 89 in Germany. When Nazareth revived Love Hurts, the Everly Brothers had already been separated for 3 years. Upon their reunion in 1983, they reintroduced the song into their setlist. How about that? They actually debuted it at their comeback concert at Royal Albert Hall. The performance was captured and released as a live album. Interestingly, in subsequent years, their rendition of the song appeared to carry a deeper meaning, almost as if they were singing it to each other on stage, reflecting the restraint in their relationship. Wow.
It's just a lie made to make you blue.
After collapsing on stage in July 2013, rumors began to circulate that Dan McCafferty had suffered a stroke. However, in an interview with Classic Rock magazine, Dan clarified that it was actually a burst stomach ulcer that caused his collapse during this concert in Canada. Reflecting on the incident, he mentioned, "I thought I'd be fine, but you lose so much blood when that happened, and I just fainted." In addition to that health scare, Dan also battled chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, which was the culprit that led to his passing on November 8th of 2022 at the age of 76. Danny Sweet passed away in 99. He was only 51. It may have been written in rock and roll heaven that Dan McCafferty and Manny Charlton were supposed to die around the same time, because that's exactly what happened. Only 4 months before Dan's death, Manny passed away at 80 years of age. So that leaves only Pete Agnew to carry on for Nazareth. And Pete remembers the day that the band decided to risk their cushy day jobs to take a shot at becoming rock stars. He said, and I quote, "It was the 1st of July, 1971, and our manager told us, 'Turn pro, and I'll pay you the same salary as you're earning now.' We were all married at the time, so although it wasn't much money, it made things a lot easier for us to really get started. They decided to give it a year at that point. Things didn't work out, they'd fall back to their regular jobs." Pete also shared another indelible time in the Nazareth saga. While touring with Leonard Skinner in 1977, tragedy, of course, struck with the infamous plane crash that claimed the lives of Ronnie Van Zant, Steve Gaines, and many others.
Members of the group, including its leader, Ronnie Van Zant, were among the 6 people killed in this crash.
But get this, media reports included members of Nazareth among the casualties. This left Pete and his bandmates unaware until the following day that this had been reported. The false news plunged their families into deep despair, believing they'd lost their loved ones. I mean, can you imagine being halfway around the world receiving fake news about your spouse dying and having no way to find out if it were true? No cell phones back then. As soon as they discovered the mistake, the band hurried to reassure their families that they were safe. Pete vividly recalls the overwhelming relief in his wife's tears when he called to confirm their survival. Wow. You know, I remember the first time my dad played this vinyl. I was just a kid. I was probably 5 years old. When I heard Love Hurts for the first time, I was mesmerized. My dad could see that I was taken by this song, and I remember him saying, you know, he has a really big voice. Can you hear the pain in his performance? As soon as my dad said that, it made me sad for this guy, and I realized the true emotion that was coming from him and others who would sing after him. And, you know, when my dad said that, I just never listened to music the same way again when I heard that. It deepened for me because of that experience.
Love is just a lie, meant to make.
Boudleaux and Felice Bryant's song about the realities of love are manifested in many ways in everyone's life. I mean, when you have love in any fashion, there will be pleasure and there will definitely be pain. That's what makes it such a powerful, unexplainable, unpredictable human phenomenon. As the song goes, any heart is not tough or strong enough to take a lot of pain. Take a lot of pain. Love hurts. Does it ever? Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about the craziness of this song, how it was recorded, the plane crash. I could not believe when I heard that little tidbit. This is such a great vocal performance. Let's talk about it below. Let's talk about your memories, the first time you heard it and such. Nazareth, one of the great underappreciated bands of their time for sure. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.